Alright, ladies and gentlemen, this is going to be our next video on environmental science and specifically going over traps and pesticides. Let's get through this next video. So there are going to be two types of traps that we've gone through and we're going to go through and talk about in the course. We've gone through and built our forcing cone traps, and those are designed to go through and enable a cone that will go through and force the lanternflies into a specific area. It's different than our sticky traps, and we can see that we're trying to get the lanternflies to move up through the tree and move into that plastic bag. Now the sticky traps are going to be different. They're going to be made out of an adhesive sticky material, and that adhesive sticky material is going to allow the lanternflies to get stuck as they move up the tree. So those are the two main types of traps that we're going to go through and discuss when going through and designing our lanternfly traps. However, we want to go through and think about both of these and think about how we can improve or make these designs better. Now, there is a problem with the sticky traps. They're going to go through and catch unwanted animals. And these could be things such as birds or squirrels or other insects that we're not going through and targeting in this specific experiment. Sticky traps are indiscriminate in what they're going to go through and catch. And that is a problem if we're going through and trying to conserve the environment. Now there is another way that we can go through and eradicate the lanternflies, and we can use pesticides and insecticides. Now a pesticide is a substance that is used for destroying insects or other organisms that are harmful to cultivated plants or to animals. And pesticides are going to be applied to these plants, and they're going to go through and eradicate whatever organisms they're going through and targeting. Now, pesticides are really important if we want to go through and grow crops on a farm. However, pesticides can have negative effects on humans. So in order to better understand what those effects on humans might be, we want to go through and think about how they're going through and how they affect the insects. So if we review our insect anatomy and go over our insecticides, well, the insect is going to have a couple protections that allows it to go through and survive in an environment. If we were to go through and let's take an x-ray shot of the side of this cockroach here, what we would go through and see is the exoskeleton. And this exoskeleton is a rigid external covering for the body in some invertebrate animals. And this can be in arthropods, and it's going to provide support and protection for these specific insects and animals that we're going to go through and talk about. Now, pesticides can go through and infiltrate this exoskeleton if we remember our anatomy. If you remember, on the back of the abdomen, we have these spiracles, and these are small air holes for gas exchange. If we go through and apply insecticides or pesticides, these insecticides can enter through the spiracles and penetrate that exoskeleton, therefore harming or damaging that insect. So how do these pesticides work? Well, we have to go through and look at them from a biochemical standpoint. Let's go through and review what a nerve cell looks like. We have our cell body, nucleus, and then we're going to start at the top here with our dendrites. These dendrites are going to receive electrical messages from other cells and allow for cell-to-cell communication. Now, as we move down, we see the axon, and the axon is going to go through and transfer these electrical messages down the actual cell, and then it's going to transfer it to these terminal endings that connect to the dendrites of the next cell. These terminal endings transfer these electrical messages to the other neural endings. And the process continues, and this is how insects and human bodies go through communicate in a neural network and allow the body to function. So this electrical signal is going to travel down from the cell body and move down to the terminal endings here. And we can see that this electrical signal is going to be caused by ions. We're going to have ions that are going to go through and enter into the cell membrane. And as these ions go through and move through the cell membrane here, and as more and more ions enter, we're going to get what we call an axon potential. And really all this is an electrical signal that enables cell communication and body function. Now, when a pesticide has gone through and applied, it's going to inhibit these gates that allow these ions to go through and move in. So if we zoom in on one of these gates, we can see that normally, in order for that electrical signal to work, what we're going to see is these ion-gated channels. These ion-gated channels normally go through, and when we want that electrical signal, it's going to let the ions move in, flow into the actual neuron, and then we get that electrical pulse. But when we go through and apply this pesticide here, the pesticide is going to prevent those ions from going through and communicating. Those ions can no longer move into that neural network, and it's going to inhibit that axon potential and inhibit that electrical signal. Now, insects and humans have very, very similar neural networks, and these insecticides can also go through and have harmful effects on humans. However, the dose and the duration that the insects are exposed to allows them to go through and be eradicated. These insecticides can be harmful to humans, but again, the dose is generally not enough to go through and harm individuals. Now, it's important for us to go through, and especially when we're going through and talking about insecticides, us to understand caffeine and nicotine. Now, caffeine is a compound that's found especially in tea and coffee plants, and this is going to be a stimulus to the nervous system. We see this in our coffee. Now, nicotine is also naturally occurring, and it's an insecticide that blocks the action of the nervous system in a very similar way to caffeine. So when we think about caffeine and nicotine, those are naturally occurring insecticides that plants go through and produce in order to protect themselves from insects. So caffeine naturally occurs in the coffees and teas during that brewing process. When you go through and consume a cup of coffee, you're getting a small amount of caffeine. Now remember, we're thinking about dose and duration. You're getting a small enough dose that it's not going to have a negative effect on your health. Nicotine is going to be a little bit different though. Nicotine is significantly more potent and toxic, and this is actually placed in tobacco products to make them more addictive. So not only is it going to go through and block actions of the nervous system, it is toxic at lower doses, it's also going to be addictive. But when we go through and talk about caffeine and nicotine, they are naturally occurring insecticides that will go through and kill insects. So it's important that we think about some of the negative health effects that caffeine and nicotine can have on the human body, considering how similar our neural structures are to many of these arthropods. Alright, so did you guys learn? Well, did you learn a couple of things? Did you guys go through and learn about the types of traps and then the pesticides? Did you guys learn about how insecticides and how these pesticides work? Then did you guys go through and learn about caffeine and nicotine? This is going to be the end of the video. I will see you all in class tomorrow.